welcome to a new session with Code with Sally. This session currently run every Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm happy to have you today in a new session. For anyone who's joining for the first time, welcome, and I'm happy to have you with us in the session, or if you're watching the video offline. Just to give a quick reminder, it would be great if you can subscribe to the channel and to be notified with any videos we upload. It's not just for the session. Sometimes I answer questions with videos, and sometimes if I have some free time, I can upload or create some content that would be useful for you. So currently we are finished the beginner series. So if you missed it, you can go to this playlist for the beginner series. You will find the older videos first and the newest at the end. Currently we are in the intermediate series, so where we started talking in depth about Apex invocation, and we chose to start first with the asynchronous Apex. So we discussed understanding asynchronous Apex, and we explained future methods on 2 sessions. And then before jumping to Queueable and Batch and Scheduler, we decided to take a pause and explain interface. Today we'll be using one of the interfaces that Salesforce is offering. So if you want to understand more what is an interface and how to use it and the benefit for it, I highly recommend that you go to the previous session that we had the last time. So it gives you a background on the interface in general, and we created our custom interface as well. Feel free during the session to ask any questions. I will be monitoring the chat, and if after the session as well you have questions, feel free to post them on Slack. And we have Code with Sally Slack. If you are watching offline and you want to participate, send me a LinkedIn message and I will send you an invite to join it. Or you can send me on LinkedIn, and I will do my best whether to answer one-on-one or to create a new content for you on YouTube channel and to answer your question. So today we will resume our journey with asynchronous Apex. As I mentioned, we had a brief pause last time where we said okay, before starting Queueable Apex, we want to understand what is an interface, because today we'll be using one of those. But Queueable is part of our series of asynchronous Apex. And we said before, just a quick reminder, asynchronous Apex is very powerful. It's very useful. Sometimes you don't want to wait or block the user in the interface and wait for a long time, a process that will take long time. And sometimes you want to do it in another thread or another transaction on the side and keep going. And that's where the benefit of asynchronous comes. We checked before together the future method, and we discussed how easy it is to implement it. It's one of the easiest ways to do asynchronous Apex. Today, we'll move to Queueable. We discussed as well some limitations with future methods, and the way to overcome those limitations would be to use Queueable Apex. So let's start together to learn more about Queueable today. So this is a visual representation to give you, again, a quick brief or summary, and to give you an idea what's waiting as well for the next sessions. So we discussed as part of the asynchronous Apex series, we discussed future methods. Today we'll talk about Queueable, and next time we'll start Batch Apex if we get the time to finish everything we want to discuss with Queueable Apex today. So, and Schedule Apex, that would be something as well. We'll do it in the future. So today the focus is on Queueable Apex and to show how it's more flexible than future and how we can use it to chain different jobs and to compare between future methods in Queueable Apex. So Queueable Apex, again, it's another way to do asynchronous Apex. So it's code that we want to run in the background asynchronously. Asynchronously, for anyone who didn't attend before, it means it's a different thread The UI is not waiting. It's not waiting for, like, if we call something asynchronously, the code will continue working. It's not waiting for the asynchronous Apex to be executed and done. So it's the code that we want to run later in the background, and we don't want to block the current code that is working. You're right. Like if you remember when we discussed feature, we were creating methods. Feature method, and it was simple. You can do it within your class, or you can create another class depending on how you wanted to organize your code. So for Queueable, it's different structure. We'll have to create a class, and the class needs to implement an interface called Queueable interface. And we said, when we learned about interfaces in Apex last time, we said Salesforce will offer some out-of-the-box interfaces for us to use, and some we can do ourselves. And that's why we paused and we explained Queueable implements and interface last time. So, and that's like the documentation, Salesforce documentation that will explain to you if you're interested about the Queueable interface that we are going to implement as part of Queueable Apex. And it will explain to you the usage, when to do it. And like we said, with interface, it's a contract. We can specify the specific methods that we want to be implementing in each class that will implement our interface. So the methods for the Queueable interface is just execute, and it takes context, Queueable context. So we find ourselves writing this method over and over again with every class that we will say it implements Queueable interface. So that's just to give you an idea how we are linking sessions together. And if you missed the explanation of interfaces, I highly recommend you go for the previous session. And something as well, when you do Queueable Apex, you start or you queue a job that you want to say, okay, I want to implement or execute this class as Queueable class later on. So you put it in a queue, and whenever there is resources available for it, we don't know when, Salesforce will run it. Usually it doesn't take long, but again, it's not instantly guaranteed that it will run. So Salesforce will run it whenever the resources are available, and it will pick it up from the queue where you keep adding your jobs into it. So it's very useful, or it's a good way to use it when we have a task that will take long time, or we don't want it to happen, we don't care if it happens immediately or not. And we discussed that as well, in general, Synchronous will block the code from going to the next line before the current line is done and completed. With asynchronous, you call it and you forget about it. It will run whenever it runs, but you can continue with your work. And that's useful because sometimes you don't want to block your code waiting for something to get done. And we discussed as well that helps with the limits, because the asynchronous code will have its own limits. So it resets the limits for this piece of code that will run asynchronous. It's more powerful than Future, and that's why we discussed Future before. Future is very simple in implementation. This will be more harder to implement, not super hard, but it's not as straightforward as the Future. We saw with the Future, it's like a normal method, and you add the tag add feature before it. So Queueable is more powerful, and why we use it, because there are some limitations with the future method that we want to overcome, and we may need it. So part of it we discussed when we explain future methods. You can pass only primitive data types, and we saw together the errors that we got when we try to pass more complex data. Here we can pass more complex data like S objects. We can pass a list of S objects. We can even define a custom class and pass it as an object to the method. So we'll see a couple of examples today and how it will be working. We saw together as well, if you remember, in the end of the future methods session, we had 3 future methods, and we tried to call them method 1, then I wanted to call method 2, then I wanted to call method 3. And we demonstrated together that we cannot guarantee the order in which they would be executed. And we had some debug statements in each, and we saw how they got executed randomly. But sometimes in real life, you may want to run a piece of asynchronous code first, and then go to another one and run it, then go to the third one and run it. So in future methods, you cannot call one from the other, from the next one. Like you cannot chain them. And when you call them separately, you cannot control the order in which they will get executed. So in Queueable, that's something we can do. And we have a demo today to show you how we'll chain one from the other one and have them or like sorted or executed in order. So that's the benefit of chain, one job from another, that we cannot do with future methods. Let me check quickly. I have a question here in the chat. Please, can you give some context when to use it? So use case, we'll see some examples today. It may give you an idea. But the use case, for example, I had in one of my projects where we had a staging table. And in the staging table, people like other processes sometimes keep adding records. And those records, I need to go, they are specifically order IDs from another system. And I need to go grab those order IDs from the other system with some APIs. So we had like a process where we keep adding, they keep adding with different processes those staging records. And we had in the trigger Queueable class to be called to get and fetch the details of the orders from the other system. So that's a use case. It's in general, whenever you have a piece of code, you want to run it asynchronously, and you don't want to block your code, or it may take long time to execute and you will execute it. Whether you use Future or Queueable Apex, that's a decision you have to make, and I will help you today with some explanations, some examples, and comparison at the end, when to use each. But again, it's a discussion that I would encourage you to have like a chat with your lead, with your technical architect within the team, if you are not sure or unclear which one to go with. But most people now start using Queueable Apex more than future method. So it's just a way to say, like, we keep adding, like, I have a request to run something in the future, then I have another one to run in the future, and Salesforce pick it up and run it and execute it whenever there is resources. Okay, so now we want to know how to write it and the syntax for it. So you will find yourself writing a class. So you will do public class, you give your class a name, and then you will start writing the code for it. You will notice that here we have implements Queueable, and that's the interface any Queueable Apex needs to implement. And we learned together last time, if you have an interface and you want to implement, so you use the syntax implements and the name of the interface. And because we are implementing an interface, we have to do all the methods written in the contract. So we saw together in Salesforce documentation, the method that's related to this interface will be execute, and it has to take Queueable context. So that's why I have here public void execute and Queueable context as the parameter this method will take. So I have this signature here because this is the signature defined by the contract, which is the Queueable interface. And that's why we wanted to make it clear by explaining interfaces last time. So here, within the curly brackets of this method, you will do the logic that you want to run in the background or you want to run asynchronously. This logic can be anything. It can be getting data from external system, updating records, doing calculation, logging details, sending emails. So it depends on the use case and what you have. This is how you define it. So again, it's a class, normal class, but the difference is that you add implements and you implement the Queueable interface. And because you are implementing the Queueable interface, you'll have the method execute here. How to use it? You'll find that you'll use a method called system.enqueueJob. So I'm queuing, like I'm initiating that I want to queue a job to do something for me. And then you create a new instance of your class. Here, instance, we saw it before when we were talking about object-oriented. We are creating an instance, an object from it. So we do new and your class name. So my class name here is MyQueueableJob, and the constructor is empty because we didn't define any custom constructor, and we'll see live today another example where we'll create our custom constructor for it. When you do this, when you do system.enqueueJob and you give it the name of the queueable class that you want to run, that will Salesforce will create a record for it in an object called Asynchronous Apex job. And we'll learn together as well today in an example shortly how we can find the status of the job, the type of it. Like you can get details, some information about this job from this object. So when you create the enqueue job, it will return for you the job ID. The job ID is the record ID for the record that got created is in asynchronous Apex job object. So it's the same, like if you create a new contact, you create a new account, you get an ID for this record. This as well, it's an S object, is a standard object that Salesforce created for us. And the method that do the enqueue job does that in the background. It create a record for our job that we are waiting for it to run in the object asynchronous Apex job. And that's something as well different from the future method, because you can query the asynchronous Apex job and find, is my job completed or not? Is it queued? Like, is there an issue in it? Like, it can give you some sort of abilities to see what's going on with your job. We couldn't do that with future method. So briefly, you will get, now you have a sense like why I meant future methods were simpler to implement, because you didn't need to create a class, you didn't need to implement an interface. So, and even the way of using the future method was by just calling the method as if you're calling a normal method. Here it's a bit more complex, but it's not that complex. If you understand interface and you understand why we have to execute, because we need to comply with the contract, and then you know that to schedule it or to put it in the queue, you do the system.enqueue. So that should be good enough. Let's try it together. I will open my code, MyQueueableJob. So MyQueueableJob, this is the one I was showing to you on the UI. You'll find that it's a class. We said it implements Queueable. If you remember, when we said, like, if you have an interface, you have to implement all its methods. If I try to save it now, it will give us an error. It will tell me that I'm missing here. It will say my Queueable job must implement the method execute, and it takes Queueable context. And that's the signature that we have here. So it will tell you, like, in case you miss it, it will tell you that you have to do it. Why we do the implement? Because that's how we tell Salesforce, be careful, this is asynchronous, not executed right away. And that's what we'll do with whenever we will enqueue it now with the syntax in developer console. So that's the definition of the class. Here, this is a very simple example just to show you the syntax. We are not doing anything. We are not doing any code, really. We are just doing a debug statement. Let me go and show you how you will execute it. So if let's close all those tabs and let me open here. You'll find that I have here an example for you how to call it. So you will have system.enqueueJob. This is a method that you have to use. And you will create here an instance of our class, MyQueueableJob. So you have MyQueueableJob here, and you'll be using it. This line will get you a job ID. And we said the job ID is only the record ID for the Asynchronous Apex job record. So here we are getting it. I will put it here, like in the debug, to show you that we returned an ID. Then I will try to get the updates for this job. So you will get, we said the object is a synchronous object, so it's an S object. We can do a so-called statement for it as we always do. I would give it a name here, and I started select ID, status, job type, number of errors, total job items, completed date if it's completed, from the asynchronous Apex job with the ID I got. And I print for you the status. Let's see this together. When I do the debug, you'll notice here as well, like we have this one, the execute anonymous, but we have as well the same as we had with the future method. We had a different lock for it because we don't know when it will be executed. So the queueable handler is the one for the queueable class or queueable Apex when it is executed. So I got here a queueable job running in the background. That's for the queueable. If I go here, I will get, that's for my debug statement. And that's where I had the code synchronous. I got the ID, I printed the ID, and then I got the status. So that's why we have two debug logs. One for this code when I executed it, and that's for the execute anonymous, and another one for the actual queueable job when it got executed. So that's why you will see two of them. And the one we have here for the execute anonymous will have what's the job ID. Once we queue it, we'll have a job ID. And then I created a query for it. So I got what's the status. At the time when this got executed, the status of this job was queued. Like it's not executed yet. It's waiting its turn to be executed. Let's take this ID and I will try to query it here. So I took the same query, select ID, status, job, all the fields, and I'll give it now my new job ID. Let's run it. I find like it's completed. It gives me the time of the completed date. It's queueable, the job type, no errors happened. So it gives me the details of the job. And you will see the difference. Like now the status is completed, but when we executed like the execute anonymous, the status was queued because it's synchronous one line at a time. And at that time, the queue job was not executed. It's asynchronous. So it was queued at a time. And then the status got updated when it's got executed and complete to be completed. So that's the benefit of having the job ID. And I want to show you another way you can look into it. If you go to Salesforce setup menu and you search here for Apex jobs on in the search in the setup and you open it, you will get this interface that will tells you like what are it's a UI interface for you rather than the developer console or like running the so-called statement. It can tell you like this time, like I had a job that ran like 12:25 and it's queueable, got completed, and it showed to me like different jobs like I was testing before the session. So it was showing to me like, okay, this one failed, this one completed, give you a UI interface to see. And you'll find that the job ID here, Apex job ID, is the same. So if I go here, search, it's the same job ID that we got in the developer console. So it helps you see like what's the job ID and what was the error, or if it succeeded, it's queued, did it finish, or it's completed or not. Because most of the time you'll have more records, you'll have more data. It may not be executed instantly as what happened here. Ours was very simple. So that's to give you an idea. The structure for it, it's not a method anymore. It's a class that implements an interface. Interface, that means we have to implement the methods and how you can run it as well. Okay, so I had the question during the session. There was a question like how we can compare the queue, where the Queueable Apex will go, to case queues, and can we create different queues for different type of jobs, or can we control how they can run? So I wanted to address this with you because I believe it's a bit confusing for anyone who's new to Queueable Apex, and it makes sense to have those questions. So let's answer it together to make sure everyone is on the same page with the answer. So let's talk about it. Like, is it the same as queues for cases? The answer is no. It's not the same. It's not related to it at all. It's an internal system job queue. It's related to the asynchronous processing engine for Salesforce. It's internal. We don't have access to those queues. Like, we cannot name them. We cannot choose which type of job will go for which queue. It's internal system job queue related to asynchronous processing. We cannot control it or name it or choose which queue will be used. So all the job will go to the same shared asynchronous processing queue, and it's managed by Salesforce. What happens next? Also, we cannot control it, and we cannot predict or control the order in which they will be executed or when they will be executed. So it's managed 100% by Salesforce. We don't have visibility or access to this queue. So we cannot create multiple queues. It's only one. When we do the system.enqueue job, all the jobs will go to the same queue, and we cannot control the order. Like if you remember when we had the example for future and we were calling future 1, future 2, future 3, we didn't control in which order they would be executed. So the same, if you do system.enqueue job for job 1, then you do the same for job 2, then the third job you do job 3, you won't be able to control the order in which they will be executed. Maybe the second job will run first, maybe the third will be next, and then last one can be the first. So we cannot control the order. It can be random, and it's not something we can control at all. So that's why, it's one advantage for Queueable Apex that we have the chaining, and that's something we'll cover next session together, and we'll see it live together in a demo. But chaining is the solution for such issue that you cannot control the order for the jobs in the queue, but you can make sure that you don't call or enqueue all of them at once. You can enqueue the first job, and at the end of the first job, you enqueue the second job, and at the end of the second job, you can enqueue the third job. And when you do that, that gives you the control and the option to be controlling the order in which the jobs will be executed. So that's the benefit. If you go randomly and add them all at once in the queue, again, the order can be random and you cannot control it. And that's why the chaining will come into picture when you have this situation where you want to do job A, then job B, then job C. You will do the chaining for them to control the order. So again, don't confuse yourself by comparing this queue where the jobs will be added to the case queues. They are totally different concepts. This one is internal, Salesforce control it, Salesforce handle it. and we don't have control over it and when it will run or when the jobs will be picked to be executed. Whenever the resources are available, they will be executed, and we cannot control the order unless we do the chaining. I hope that answered the question. If you still have more questions or it's not clear for you, please message me on Slack or LinkedIn, and I will do my best to answer you to make it more clear for you. Here we want to explain passing complex data types to Queueable Apex. And that's to explain to you the benefit of using Queueable over future methods. Because when we explain future methods, we explain like we have to have primitive data types, we cannot pass as objects. So we had some limitations on the parameters, and we saw together if we tried a non-supported data type, what was the error as well. So here, it's unlike future. Queueable lets you pass custom data types, or you can pass even as objects. So you can pass map, set, or list of records. You can have a list of contacts and pass it. We couldn't do that with future methods. Also, we can create a custom class. We call it wrapper. Sometimes people call it something else. And we can add many details, can be different data types, custom, different as objects in the same class. And you can pass this class as a whole, as an object from this class as a whole to Queueable. Definitely, we cannot do that with future methods. And we have an example on how we can pass a list of contacts, and we'll have another example how we'll create a wrapper and pass it to a queuable job as well. It's great whenever you have like a use case where you're not just interested in passing an ID or primitive data type. So, and that's sometimes when you're working in a project, like you want to do something asynchronous, but you want to pass a wrapper class, or you want to pass a list of S objects. You are not just interested in one primitive data type or like primitive data types to be passed. So that's a plus for Queueable that we cannot do with future methods. How we'll be passing data, we saw together, we are not calling a method, we are creating an object from a class. So the only way to do that is to do constructor, but custom constructor, like we saw together in the example here, that when we created our job, it's a class. We didn't create any custom constructor here, no constructor. And when we created the system.enqueueJob, we created an instance from our class with a blank constructor. We can pass parameter by creating another constructor overload that takes parameter, and we can pass the parameter that way. And we'll see it together as well in the example shortly. So we'll start with a simpler example where we'll talk about like passing a list of contacts to a queue, to a queueable job, and we'll start updating details about these contacts in the job. So, for example, imagine like you are importing multiple contacts from a marketing event, and at the end, like you want to call a Queueable Apex to update their region, for example. Again, be mindful that we will be working with like hundreds of records, not thousands, not millions of records. Whenever we want to update that huge amount of records, we'll move to the next asynchronous apex, which will be batch jobs. But for today, we'll assume that we have tens, 20, like hundreds of records. So we won't be working with huge amount of records. So you can, I have here a piece of code that we can execute to create for us some records, some contacts. So I can have here demo Thursday. So, and I create like first name, last name, and I will add Thursday as well here. And we'll be creating hundreds. We can even do 200s of contacts. That's just to prepare the data for our demo. So I'll create those. It's just as simple as creating the 200 contacts and insert them. So we created them, no issues. Let's open together the class that we want to work with. So I'll open it in my here, and let's open it in Code with Sally Visual Studio Code. So I created the class, but it's empty, and I wanted to fill it with you. Don't worry about the code for the class. It will be on GitHub after we finish. So once we say like we want to implement or a Queueable Apex, that will say, okay, I created a class and I give it a name. We want, first step is to implement our Queueable interface. So you'll do implement and the name of the interface, which is Queueable. Next would be, because we have Queueable, I will create execute method. And this execute method, the signature we agreed on, it's execute, it's void, and it takes something called Queueable context, and we give it a name. You don't have to give the same name. You can do whatever name you want. And let's pause for now. How to use it and the benefit of having this context. We'll show a use case or why we would need it or how we can use it, but later on. Now, that's what we did in the last one, and we can add our logic here. But we want to pass a list of contacts because the use case is I want to pass a list of contacts, and then I want to loop through them to update them. So what we will do is we will add private properties to my class. If anyone missed object-oriented, we explain together the difference between public and private and why we need private. Private is more for encapsulation, or when you have a private parameters, that means they are accessible only through the code within your class. That means if I create an instance from ContactUpdaterQueue, I won't have access to contacts to update or region from the object. It's not visible for me. It's only visible for the class, for the code within my class. So that's just a quick reminder. And we said in the slide, we'll have to have a constructor where we will create, let me disable Agentforce for now. Agentforce autocomplete. And here I want to create my constructor. Again, with object-oriented, if you missed it, we'll have a series for it. But we said the constructor is a special type of method where it will be the same name of the class. And you can pass here parameters. By default, if you don't create Salesforce whenever you create a class, it's as if you have an empty constructor like this one. But now I want to pass parameter through my constructor. So I'll be passing what's the region. I want to update the region for the context, so I want to define it. And what are the contexts I want to update? So I pass here contexts and list, it's a list of contact and the string for the region. Here within my constructor, I will set my private attributes to the parameters that we got. And the same for the region. And that's the way to pass parameter. Like you created a constructor, you pass parameter to the constructor, and within the constructor, you would be setting the private properties of your class with whatever values you're passing. Here, my logic for the execute, all I need to do is to loop through the context and update their region, and then perform the operation of the update. So I will add the logic here, and second, yeah. So you'll find that all I did is loop through the context for each, Again, we have a session for the for loops if you missed it. And I'm going through one by one, setting the custom field I created with the region that we passed in the constructor. And we'll update the list of the contacts at the end. So let's save it. So that's another example of what you can do in the execute. The first example was simple debug statement. Now we did something more like a layer on top of it where we are setting values or updating, doing a DML to do an update. And that's how you will be passing parameters. Here, the parameters is a list of contact and a string for the region value. Let's see how we will execute it. I will go to the developer console. And here, if I open one of those, like let's see, demo Thursday, I will have here one of them open for you to see. Like we have the region empty. We don't have any values for it. So let's go and execute it. Again, let's do this. What we were doing before, we said we'll do system.enqueueJob. So here I can do that. And that will enqueue the job for me. But if I run it now, it will give me an error or an exception. It will tell me that we don't have a constructor, empty constructor anymore. And that's because I created a constructor in my class that takes parameter. We don't have anymore the constructor, the empty constructor. And that's something we discussed with examples in the object-oriented sessions too. Once you define one constructor that takes parameter, the empty constructor is not available for you anymore unless you add it as another constructor overload in your class. So that means here I need to pass a list of contacts and the region value. The list of contacts, I need to get it. The region I can choose, for example, I will make it global. I have a value in my pick list, global. I need to get the list of contacts. So I can run a SOAP statement to get the list of contacts where they were created today. We created 200, and I believe I created another 100 in the morning. So we'll have in total 300 records. Now I can pass this to my list. Again, I can as well print the job ID. So we go and see it, and I will show you once it's created, it will be queued as a status. So let's try this together. And let's see here, we don't have, let's close this one. This is the last one. We'll see 2 logs will be created. Let's execute. So I have the execute anonymous, and that's the one that is open. It tells me that the status is queued for the job, and it gave me the ID for it. And then when the job got executed, I got another log file for the queue handler. And we don't have anything there to log, so we don't see anything when I do the debug log. But if I go and use the job ID and execute here, I'll find that it's completed. So if I open the same record here and refresh, now I will see that the region became global. And it got updated 12:46 when we reran this logic or this code. So that's how you can pass parameter. It's always through the constructor. And that's an example on how you can pass just a list of S objects. We were not able to do that with the future method. Another example, I would love to show it to you. Like the example we have is enough, but let's say you are working in a project and you have a wrapper class and you want to use this wrapper class to pass it. So let's see the wrapper class we have. I have a wrapper class called ContactRegionWrapper. I prepared this one. It has a class. I created properties in it. One is a list of contact, one is a region, and the ID, who's the user who assigned this region. So for example, I want to create an instance from this wrapper class and pass all the details at once instead of multi parameters to my Queueable. Can we do that with future? Definitely we cannot. We cannot pass an instance or an object from a custom class to a future method. So let's see it together with the Queueable. So I will open for you here the other class that we have, ContactRegionJob, and I will open it here so we can work with it. Again, it's a class. It's in simple class, nothing special about it. But once I put implements Queueable, because we want it to be Queueable Apex, I will be enforced to create the execute. So I will add the execute method as empty. Next is that we'll put the logic here later. But now we said we want to pass a parameter from the contact region wrapper. So I will create here a private and I will name it, say, data. How can I pass it? We agree together. It will be through the constructor. So I create a constructor, region job, and it can take here the class. And I can pass it here, even the same name. I pass data. I can say here this.data, which means I am setting the data of the current instance of the class, the object, and I'm setting it with the parameter that came. And that's how you will differentiate between the data that you have in your class versus the data that is passed in the parameter. And we have a detailed explanation of this dot and its usage in the object-oriented series too. So what we have here is an instance from the contact wrapper data is passed. I want to do the same, that we want to update the context. So what I will do now is I will loop through the contacts and I will go contact by contact. So to loop through the contacts is data, which is an instance from ContactRegionWrapper.contacts. Instead of I was looping through the contacts directly, I'm looping through the contacts in my wrapper object. And then I'm setting the region with the region name we have here. And I'm giving a description, let's say region assigned by, and I put the assigned by value that I have in my object instance that I passed. And at the end, after looping through the contacts and updating all of them, I will just update the list of contacts in my Apex here. So let's deploy and try together. So it's just the same logic we had, but instead of passing the region as a string and list of contacts as a list of contact, I just wanted to show you that you can work with a custom Apex class as a parameter as well. And because that's something we can usually need to deal with in real projects, and future methods won't allow it. It's just to give you a sense why Queueable Apex, it's much better or more powerful. So let's go here and I will open the debug statement. Again, I can get the list of contacts I want to work with. But now, instead of passing this directly to my job, I'll be creating an instance from my wrapper, contact region wrapper. And I will give 3 parameters. What is the contact? The contacts, you will see here, we had in the constructor, it takes context, list of contact, then a string for the region, and ID for the user. So we can have here the contacts, and I will name it, use the right name here. I give here a parameter, I want to change the region, and then the ID is my logged in user ID. So I created my wrapper that will give just an instance from Contact Region Wrapper, and it will set the values for us here, contacts for region and assigned by. So we have it here. Now, instead of this in QJob, like we have another one, which is the contacts region job. It's the other job that will expect the wrapper. Instead of passing the list and global, you can pass directly the wrapper here. And again, we can run it. We'll get the job ID. We'll get the status. It will be queued at the beginning. Then we can see how it will be completed after. So if I do here, and I will do debug only, we'll see that it was queued. Now it got executed. And here we go. We don't have anything in the debug log to show. But if I go and use the job ID here, if I go here and retrieve it, I find that my job got, the status is completed and the time of the completion as well. If I refresh my contact, the region should be updated. It's not global anymore. And the description, region assigned by, and the ID. You can have the username instead of the ID. You can have whatever the logic is. But that's just a simple example to give you an idea how to pass parameters to your Queueable Apex. And those two examples is just to give you a sense of the different ways to do it. You can have a list or list of contacts, list of S objects. You can have parameters, primitive data type pass. You can have a wrapper class, an instance from a specific class pass. It doesn't matter. The common things between the two will be that we have implement and that we have the same signature here. How you will pass the data is always through the constructor. What type of data? It can be whatever data type you need to pass. It can be custom object from like custom class, or it can be a list of S objects, primitive data type, whatever. So those are the common things. Implement queueable needs to be there. Void execute, the method will be there to like implement the contract of queueable interface. Then the constructor is the way to pass parameter. So those, regardless of the Apex queueable that you are implementing, will be there. If you don't need to pass data for any reason, you won't have this, or you won't have the private properties. You will have just the execute. The required minimum requirement is the execute because you have the implements queueable. So that's what I wanted to show you so far. I don't want to rush and finish the rest today because it would be too much to demo at one session, and we want to go through the examples together and make sure we understand them. But to give you an idea, next time we'll talk about how we can chain jobs together, and we'll see a demo for it and how to do it. We'll understand together why it's important to chain jobs. Then we'll talk about how we can test queueable jobs. We saw together how we can test future method. We'll explain it and show it together. And then we saw together in future method, we needed to do callout equal true to be able to do external API calls. We'll have a quick example on how to do that with Queueable Apex. Because there is a small thing that we need to take care and make sure we are doing as well. And we'll have a quick discussion together when to use future versus Queueable Apex. And because the table here will give you an impression that Queueable is much better, why ever I would use future, we'll have this discussion as well together. And after that, the session after it will be answering this question: what if I need to process thousands and millions of records? Because we discussed like queueable would be good if you have hundreds, not so much records to like modify or to go through. But what if we have hundreds of millions or thousands of records to update? what will be the right way to do it. So that's just to give you an idea of the roadmap of what's coming next. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. But next time will be part 2 of Queueable Apex. We'll try to make it part 2 only and finish everything next time, unless we feel like it's too much information and we want to split it further. But I think we should be good to finish everything next session with part 2 of Queueable. Any questions before stopping the recording?
Oh, sorry. Yes. Well, I have a question here. So I understand, we're saying this is for smaller size records. So, but everything is dynamic and is run asynchronously. So in my mind, there can be the chance that where you think there's only 100 records, something's changed in the environment. Now you have thousands of records unbeknownst to you. So in your logic, do you have to account for that or verify that it's safe to run, or how does that work?
In general, like the situation where you have thousands of records, most probably you would know beforehand, because it's something, the API, the limits, you can hit the governor limits. So it's something, it's not happening by chance. Like, for example, if I'm getting the records here to execute, if I'm in real life example, I will have a limit on the number of records I'll be returning. So in a way or another, before executing your Queueable Apex, you should have thought about like the use case and when it will be used. And most probably, like if you're passing a list of records, most probably in your SOAP, you will be having this limit, because we still have the limits, the governor limits that is limiting our implementation anyways. So if you have a use case, for example, we are introducing a new field that is required and we need to make it required on an object, and we don't want to enforce it with validation or anything. We want to enforce it. And we know that we have history or records that we need to update. Otherwise, users will stop being able to use it and they will get an error. This use case sometimes happen in real life projects, and sometimes users say, okay, don't make it required on the object. But sometimes there is a hard request to make it required, and you have to go and update 10,000 of records, 50,000 of records to set the default value for this field. In that case, you know in advance that you are exceeding the limits and you have so many records. So the answer won't be go with Queueable Apex. It would be to go with batch classes. So it
That makes
depends
sense.
on like the use case and why you need it. And most probably before passing this list, you will already have your limits set here.
Yeah.
If the
All right.
code
That
didn't
makes sense.
take into consideration that, you may hit the limit and then you will say, okay, is Queueable was the right answer? Do I have to add a limit here, or do I have to change my strategy and do something else? So that's the way how I think about it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope it was useful. I hope I added something new for your knowledge. If you have any questions from here till next time, please message me, send me on Slack, LinkedIn. I will do my best to answer you. I will see you next time with a new session for part 2 of Queueable Apex, where we'll talk about training and we'll talk about the other topics we want to cover for Queueable Apex. And if you think I missed something and you want to see it next session or the session after, please message me as well. Thank you so much, and I will see you next Thursday.